the Attic Wall by Sylvia Cassedy, Chapter 21. Maggie was alone in the kitchen, polishing silverware. "Ingesting silver tarnish is dangerous to the system," Aunt Lillian had said, and she had sat Maggie down with a jar of polish, a heap of rags, and the contents of the silver drawer laid out in squadrons across the table. The tablespoons had nice round surfaces, and Maggie began with them, spreading on the thick pink paste and rubbing until the rag turned black, and her finger, poking through, turned black too. Then she dropped each spoon into a pail of water and polished it until it gleamed, and she could see her face, upside down in its hollow. The January light entered the window reluctantly, casting its meager glow on a narrow panel across the table. Maggie had to bring the spoon closer and closer to her face in order to see it. So close, finally, that her features flipped right side up, and all she could see was the bulb of her nose. She sat and stared at its pink flesh until her breath steamed it over. Silence had settled down in the house once again. Like a fog, it filled the corners, slipped beneath the curtains, rose from the rugs, and crept under the covers at night when Maggie went to bed. Everything was as it had been during her first days at Adelphi Hills. Before the voices, Aunt Harriet and Aunt Lillian moved from room to room on their silent wheels. Sometimes they went out, but Maggie never knew where they went, or when even. Often it wasn't until she saw their rubber galoshes lying in a pool of slush in the front hall that she knew they had gone out at all. Maggie, too, moved from room to room, although she wasn't allowed to enter most of them. She would slip upstairs after school and wander through the hallway, opening doors, fingering a hairbrush or a string of beads, returning to the hallway with its dark, silent walls. Sometimes she missed the voices. Once she thought she heard them, and she flung open her bedroom door, but it was only Aunt Harriet moving slowly at the other end of the corridor, her sleeves whispering against her dress as she dusted the moldings. It didn't matter. The voices just belonged to some dumb dolls anyway. Besides, the dolls didn't want her either. She wasn't the right one. Who would have been, she wondered. Someone probably who would have poured their pretend tea and nibbled their wooden bread and politely watered their wallpaper roses and sat in their make-believe garden saying all the right things. Someone nice. Sometimes the backwoods girls came to visit. "This is light," she said, pausing between doorways in the long corridor. "Oh, how wonderful," they answered as she pulled on a cord and created a small disk of orange in the center of her, at the edge of her feet. But she could find nothing else to show them, and they soon retreated to their haunts in the woods. Uncle Morris came once. "We should visit the roses," he said, and she looked up at him sharply. What roses? But he meant the ones outside in the garden. "Roses tend to die in winter. Not from the frost, as everyone thinks, but from boredom. Imagine sitting out in a garden all winter long, with not even a magazine to look at. Come on, we'll cheer them up." And he led her outside. They stood a while in the snow, facing a row of rose bushes, wrapped against the wind in their burlap shawls. "I always felt it to be a great mistake," he said, "to have winter in January when it is so cold. They should have it in July when we can all go out and enjoy it." He touched one of the burlap wrappings with the silver knob of his walking stick. "Roses wear these blankets to keep their throats from getting sore," he said. And again she looked up at him. The dolls had said something like that. Throats of the plant. "What throats?" she asked. But he only answered, "The ones with all those tonsils. Do you know what rose tonsils are, Maggie?" She didn't bother to listen to the rest. She stuck her finger into the silver polish. It was lovely and pink, and it made big creamy smears on the enamel kitchen table, like finger paint. She rippled it into a mountain, a cloud, a fat pink sun with rays. "Look," she said to the backwoods girls, "this is magic paint. I can write in it with my finger. Here's my initial," and she traced out an M in the curly script. "Oh, how wonderful! Write my letter too. Write E for Elizabeth." "All right, but don't shout. Here's K for Kate, here's E for Elizabeth, M for Mary, H for Helen, A for Anne, and TJ for you can't guess." "Who's TJ?" "Never mind." Tell us, who is it?" "This person I know." "Who?" "None of your business." She wiped the initials away with her fist. "Somebody. Nobody." The silence continued. Did the dolls still speak to each other, she wondered, even though they no longer spoke to her? Had they picked themselves up after she left and hobbled somehow to the tea-table, where they were now lifting the kettle and clicking their painted lips against the edges of the wooden bread? Were they speaking about her? Or had they fallen silent for good? For good, that is, until someone else, the right one, came along decades from now. She could go up and see. She wouldn't have to stay, and she wouldn't even let them see her if they could see. She could just stand and listen for a minute, 2 minutes, and then come back downstairs, not that it mattered. Everything was as she had left it. The little chairs around the table, the sofa, the china cabinet, the beds, the broom in the corner. Slowly she made her way past the room and along the wall that led to the place with the wallpaper, the garden. The 2 dolls and the dog were lying where they had fallen, Miss Christabel half sitting, half reclining against the wicker chair, her flowered skirt flat where her knees should have been, Timothy John against the wall and Juniper upside down beside the wallpaper roses. Maggie looked down into their china smiles, waiting for them to speak, but no sound came. "It's me," she said finally. "Maggie, I was the one who was here, do you remember? I just wanted to see if you were still here or what." Neither doll moved. "It doesn't matter," she shrugged. "They're just dolls." "I just came to find out if you were still here," she repeated. "I have to go now." But she didn't go. With the edge of her toe, she lifted Miss Christabel's skirt. The little china leg was separated at the knee, and Maggie bent down to pick up the broken end. 2 little holes at one end marked the point where a pin had been fitted or a wire. "Where is it?" she asked, lifting Miss Christabel's body and shaking out her dress. "Where's the little wire thing that your knee is attached to?" She knocked over one wicker chair, the other, and there in the dust lay a tiny pink and white chip. "Hey, here's your ear," she said to Juniper. "Look, here's the ear that came off. Here's where it goes," and she fitted it to the dog's head. She could fix it, maybe, with the paste in her desk drawer. She could fix the dolls, too, even, but they still wouldn't talk or move because she wasn't the right one. But she could make them look the way they had before she had kicked them. She could fix them and then leave them here for the right one. "Wait for me," she said, slipping Miss Christabel's leg into her pocket. "Wait, I'll be back in a little while." And that is where Chapter 21 ends.